Hello and welcome to Isaan Flicks. This morning I finally made some time to take a ride about on my motor scooter, as I have been rather busy of late doing nothing, which I have been unable to finish, but no doubt there will be other days to do just that. I am not sure where we are heading, so I have put my GPS on, as it gives me a better idea of what lies ahead. As we ride about, I thought I would try and give you a little bit more of the history I do know about Isaan here in northeast Thailand. So please, I ask you to take a few minutes to sit back, relax and ride with me and listen to some history about northeast Thailand. Northeast Thailand, Isaan, or the Karat Plateau as this region is sometimes called, was for several centuries prior to the end of the 13th century part of the Angkor Empire, and its population was probably predominantly Khmer. When the Thai-speaking people, that's spelt T-A-I, began to arrive in the area is not really known, but many believe it could have been sometime in the 10th century. Whatever the actual reasons may have been, the appearance of the Thai-speaking peoples in the area, which comprises of present-day Thailand and Laos, was probably not a sudden massive flood of these people, encouraged by political events in their southern Chinese homeland, as has sometimes been suggested. Rather, the process was probably one of a gradual flow of immigrants who began by holding positions of command over the communities of the local farmers and ended by gaining control over the native peoples among whom they had settled and whose culture they had integrated. The first evidence of the presence of Thai-speaking peoples in the territories dominated by the Khmer appears on one of the stone sculptured murals of Angkor Wat of the 12th century. Although they had already established themselves in principalities of the northwest periphery of the Angkor Empire by the 11th century. In the 13th century, a Thai chieftain overthrew a Khmer provisional governor or commander in an outpost of the Angkor Empire located in Sukhothai in north-central Thailand, and established the first important autonomous Thai state in an area formerly dominated by the Mons and Khmers. The king of Sukhothai at the time, Ram Kamahung, who lived around 1270 to 1316 and supposedly a great warrior, was able to extend the control of Sukhothai over most of north-central and western Thailand, part of the peninsula, and the northern part of what is now Isaan in northeast Thailand. However, there is no real evidence to suggest that there was any sizable Thai-speaking population in these parts of northeast Thailand controlled by Sukhothai at this time. It is said the kingdom of Sukhothai shortly after yielded to other Thai kingdoms in the competition between the Thai-speaking people and Khmer over the Karat Plateau. At about the same time, in the mid-14th century, the Lao Kingdom of Lansing and the Siamese Central Thai Kingdom of Ayutthaya were founded. Both these kingdoms remained important focal points for political alignments in mainland Southeast Asia until the 18th century. Although Ayutthaya lies in what is today the heart of central Thailand, at the time it lay at the edge of the Thai influence. In its expansion, Ayutthaya was primarily interested in consolidating control over central and eastern Thailand, and in reducing the power of the Khmer, and only secondary, if at all, in extending its influence over what is today Isan, northeast Thailand. However, Ayutthaya abandoned its influence over northeast Thailand at the onset of a stronger claim exerted by the new Lao Kingdom of Lansing. Lansing originated in the small Lao principalities which had appeared sometime before the 14th century in northern Laos. Phar Nung, the son of a ruler of one of these principalities, was the first significant Lao political figure of whom there is some historical record. It is said Phar Nung was born in 1316 and died in 1374, was the founder and first king of the Lao Kingdom of Lansing, who then went on and created the first unified state of the Lao people. However, it is said Phar Nung was forced to leave his homeland and was raised in exile in Angkor in a manner befitting a Khmer prince, where he converted to Theravada Buddhism and then married the daughter of a Khmer emperor, and was given troops to effect his return to the throne of Lansing and the uniting of the Lao peoples in a single kingdom. Phar Nung, in addition to establishing the Lao Kingdom of Lansing, he is also credited with introducing Buddhism to the Lao people. It has been said that the Khmer approval or support for Phar Nung was necessary for his success in creating a unified Lao kingdom, and suggested the Khmer had given their support to Phar Nung because of their desire to see the expansion of the Siamese, or Thais, stopped. The Khmers had gradually fallen down to the point where they were unable to defend themselves against the Thai expansion. The Khmer king at the time had a strong desire to retaliate against the Thais, or Siamese, or at least to check their advance. Hence the Khmer's king's kindness to Prince Phar Nung, so that he could use him to stop the Thai expansion. There is a lot more history pertaining to Phar Nung, but I shall continue with more on the Karat Plateau or the Isan region for now. I do not know much more about Lao, Siamese and indigenous provincial histories that took place in the Karat Plateau between the middle of the 14th century and the early part of the 17th century. Although little of the northeast was fully incorporated into the Lao kingdom and none into the Siamese kingdom prior to the beginning of the 17th century. Culturally, the region was becoming increasingly Lao. The migratory patterns of Lao into the region, first mentioned in connection with the rule of Phang Nung in the mid-14th century, continued during the subsequent period. In addition to what must have been a constant flow of a few Lao at a time into the region, the Karat Plateau seems to have been a haven for the politically dispossessed of Laos. As I said, culturally the region was becoming increasingly Lao, but without a court centre to look to. Local variations developed, perhaps to a greater extent than within Laos itself. Political autonomy and localism in the region were to become threatened only after the shift in the relative power of the Lao and Siamese kingdoms, which began to take place early in the 17th century. During the latter half of the 16th century, both the Lao and Siamese have been drawn together in the attempt to protect themselves against attacks by the Burmese. When the Burmese were finally routed at the end of the 16th century, both kingdoms had been weakened, although Siam had suffered more. Accordingly, in 1610, Lao attempted to take advantage of what it considered to be the greater weakness of Ayutthaya and staged an attack against the Siamese capital. However, the Siamese had recovered faster than the Lao thought, for the Siamese armies quickly rebuffed the Lao attacks and scattered the Lao forces. This event can be noted as a turning point in Lao-Siamese relations, but after this time the Siamese kingdom began to grow stronger, albeit with temporary setbacks, while the Lao kingdom slowly began to disintegrate. Although in 1670, Hue province defined the boundaries between Ayutthaya in Siam and Lansing, Lao, and much was made of the equality of Lansing and Ayutthaya. The real indicator of the relative relations of these two kingdoms in regard to the northeast was the establishment of a Siamese outpost at Nakhon Ratchashima during the reign of King Narai. In fact, the king of Lansing, ruling during the time of the event, King Surai-Awongsa. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation, but he lived between 1633 and 1690 something, was the last important king of a unified Lansing. On his death, the kingdom fell into a period of anarchy, climaxed by the split of Lansing into three kingdoms of Luang Prabang, Vientiane and Kampong early in the 18th century. The division of Lansing and the growing power of Ayutthaya brought the Karat Plateau into focus much more than had ever been the case in the past. The weakened condition of the Lao states, although not the only factor, was undoubtedly one of the main reasons for the strengthening of Siamese expansion towards the northeast, which was to continue with only temporary abatements until the end of the 19th century. In addition to the Siamese interest in the area, the division of Lansang also stirred Lao political interest in the interior of the Karat Plateau. Although the evidence is scant, it would appear that Vientiane inherited from Lansang territories lying on the right bank of the Mekong in present-day Loei, Nong Khai and Nakhon Phanom provinces. Kamphan Sak itself, located on the right bank, was absorbed into the kingdom's territories upstream of the Mun and Chi rivers, which lie today in Ubon Ratchathani and Roi Et provinces. The stage was set thus for northeastern Thailand to become a meeting place for the interests of at least three states: Vientiane, Kamphan Sak and Ayutthaya. However, before such a confrontation could occur, Burma in 1767 again attacked and laid siege to Ayutthaya. In consequence, the kingdom of Ayutthaya disintegrated into 5 parts, one of which emerged as Karat or Nakhon Ratchasima. This division was short-lived, however, as a Thai of Chinese descent, Thaksin, was able to rally a sizable military force and to piece the kingdom back together with a new capital at Thonburi, across the river from Bangkok. At the time of the Burmese attack, Vientiane was supposedly an ally of the Siamese, but following the fall of Ayutthaya, Vientiane was forced to support Burma or suffer attack itself. Vientiane's offence to the Siamese was exacerbated by allowing the self-proclaimed ruler of Karat to find asylum in Vientiane after Karat fell to Thaksin in 1768. As punishment for disloyalty, Thaksin ordered the invasion of Vientiane. During the retaliatory expedition led by General Truckley, who was later to found the Bangkok dynasty, Luang Prabang aligned itself with Bangkok and it said were forced to accept the suzerainty of Siam. Then Vientiane, after being sacked and almost completely destroyed, was placed under a Thai military commander. Kamphan Sak suffered the same fate. In 1777, Thaksin ordered Truckley to attack Kamphan Sak for having attempted to expand its territories on the Karat Plateau at the expense of the Siamese during the unsettled period following the fall of Ayutthaya. This expedition was successful and the ruler of Kamphan Sak was removed from his throne and sent to the Siamese capital. From this point on, although the king of Kamphan Sak was allowed to return home in 1780, Kamphan Sak became and remained a vassal of Bangkok. In consequence of these Siamese defeats of the Lao, the kingdom of Vientiane and Kamphan Sak became under the control of Bangkok, as I said. More importantly, the parts of the Karat Plateau not included within the territories of these vassals were incorporated as outer provinces within the Siamese kingdom. I think that is enough history of the Karat Plateau or Isaan for today. So I'd start to wrap this video up. What I've just told you is the history as I know it to be, but of course it might not be totally correct, but I do believe it is close enough to what did occur. But as always, history is based upon what was recorded at the time and is subject to opinions by expert researchers. However, I do believe history should never be rewritten without the approved supported evidence, or cancelled for whatever reason someone may find it to be offensive. Civilization always comes at a price. Life is a struggle that has to be lived. It may not be nice at times, but that is a fact of life. Improvements to life have always caused distress to someone along the way. And that is why history is very important, as it is the best tool we have to learn from, and that pertains to everything in life. However, what do I know? As I am so old, I remember when loving your country, respecting the flag, and obeying the laws were considered as good character qualities. Finally, I do apologise for any pronunciation mistakes for the Thai or Lao names I made, but even after 70 odd years I still do make mistakes in my own native English language. Whatever. I hope you have enjoyed my somewhat brief historical talk, and if you did, please give the video a thumbs up, leave me a comment, but better still, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. I may well continue with more history of Isaan and Thailand in future videos, but for today we will finish up here, and perhaps I'll continue this motor scooter ride about in another video. But until then, it is a very goodbye from me. Bye bye.